Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Um, thanks for everyone showing up. We're very pleased to hear about early ideas for your master's project. I know some of you, in some cases, might not be entirely sure what you're going to do yet, but it's really good to fairly early on think about it and put something out there. More so than ever because of our limitations in terms of our ability to see and run into one another and just have casual conversations about things, given the lack of face-to-face opportunities we have to meet. So, best case, you might see that some of you have some common themes in your work, and you can share resources and have conversations. And I think it's just good for you to know what's going on around the school. We invite students who are not in thesis to also sit in this because it's good for students that are in second or third year to get a feel for what's ahead of them and what kind of things you're working on, and they can follow it throughout the entire year and sit in on the thesis reviews at the end of the year. So we're excited for that. This is a great group, great class. We're excited for you and wish you the very best in your thesis year. Some of you have studios this semester, some of you don't. In either case, I just encourage you to stick with this and be focused and work on your MP weekly. And you should have met with your faculty at least once or more by now. And you have a long time to work on it, truthfully. I mean, we're looking ahead till the end of April, beginning of May. So use this fall to explore things, think about things, make things, and begin to construct your ideas for thesis. I'm very excited for you. So without any further ado, we'll launch the first presenter. I have to step away for a little while because I'm triple booked this morning, but I'll check in a little bit later, and then I'll see the rest of you on Thursday morning. Thanks a lot, guys.
Hi, so my name is Surya Abhumesh, and the topic for my master's project is rethinking the refugee camp. So to start off, as the world population expands with no reduction in conflict and violence, there has been a rapid increase in the number of refugees. Of the 60 million displaced people worldwide, 7.2 million are Palestinian. In terms of international refugee law, Palestinians, unlike any other group of refugees in the world, do not fall under the protection of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, therefore making Palestinian refugees ineligible for the most basic protection rights guaranteed under international law to every other refugee in the world. In general, architecture falls short of its premise to provide shelter, safety, and well-being for the refugees in camps. Therefore, I will propose a potential design for a refugee community that recognizes a sense of security, wellness, and engagement, spaces upon which the Palestinian identity is mapped and woven from memories, songs, stories of elders, and dreams. For Palestinians in Lebanon, the pain associated with their expulsion and the decades of living in exile is being aggravated by systematic discrimination against them. Their statelessness has been used by the Lebanese authorities to deny them equal rights with Lebanese nationals and other non-Lebanese nationals. Although the concept of a camp is temporary by definition, in real life the lifespan is permanent. A refugee camp is a situation of the present with no past, as something that has been established in order to be quickly dismantled. The space of a camp is no longer inside or outside, it is more of a third area, an area in suspension. This thesis will aim to outline approaches to address the challenges and concerns comprised in the design of space after forced Palestinian migration, and in the end propose a mutually beneficial scheme where the Palestinian camp becomes an incremental orchestrator of social and economical systems to contribute in the long-term progression for the host country. A framework of analysis on the anatomy of place and the configuration of the refugee camps themselves will provide insight to both the technologies of control and as sites of resistance and resilience. Studying the interrelationship between shelters and people's behavior and mental well-being will help guide the design of spaces and aid in an appropriate approach towards the refugees' needs, values, and rights. Camps are meant to be forgotten, and the only history that is recognized within is one of violence, suffering, and humiliation. Refugee camps should be seen as the cities of tomorrow, where we locate camps closer to the cities rather than borders, to give an opportunity to connect rather than segregate. A dialectic relationship between spaces and bodies exists within the triad of the perceived, conceived, and the lived spaces, which reflect both the concrete and the abstract. A design that contemplates time and addresses the Palestinian people's marginalized identity and how it has developed into resistance through culture and memory is a vital part of the research. In conclusion, the aim of this project is to discover a potential design proposal for a refugee community that recognizes a sense of security, wellness, and engagement. Every human deserves basic human rights to feel safe, to be treated with dignity, and live a life free from persecution and discrimination. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Liz. In my thesis, I will be unraveling the barrier between fairy tales and us. Humans tend to seek a reason for an action or an explanation for a cause. When the term fairy tale is associated, we categorize it as an unrealistic idea that we cannot control. Oftentimes, we neglect the crucial relationship the real world has with the fantasy world. These narratives have a purpose and are considered lesson-driven messages. Originally passed down through oral communication, these classic stories are more than 5,000 years old and have been around during the first developments of language, population, and culture. The story of Little Red Riding Hood, for example, is able to grasp your attention. It could be mostly due to its use of primary colors, cultural shift in domesticity, or political refrains about gender, class, and race. Fairy tales have endured throughout the centuries due to their versatility. In spite of their simple stories, they can be used to convey a wide range of messages and discuss a number of important issues. The following are 3 collections of work done by architects exploring the intimate relationship between the imaginative realm of architecture and the domestic structure of fairy tales. Fairy tales portray a major role in the built environment, and failing to acknowledge this affects architecture. Architecture begins to lose the ability to send a universal language, a language that can represent culture, time, and relevant issues. This entry grasps the meaning of the words girl, wolf, and woods, and what it really meant. English and Vendrell take this iteration and create a playful design. They use elements such as an umbrella and an iconic house that contain the motives of the original story, Girl, Wolf, Woods. This entry done by Levin Betts, they were really interested in the beanstalk itself, the place between the ground where Jack and his mother lived and the sky where the giant lives. They chose to think of the beanstalk as an infrastructural network between Jack's world and the giant's world. This is an entry submitted by Olsen Kundig to a fairy tale competition. His team began on a research project on the neglected top layer of cities, the rooftops. They collected data and utilized their information to unfold a fiction story, a mural, a graphic novel, and a film. So then I decided to see what story I could begin taking apart and analyzing elements within the story and seeing the relation between our world and architecture. I wish to somewhat turn myself into a storyteller, aiming to use storytells to convey views on a range of important social and political issues. It's powerful how storytelling is able to persuade us, and I want to see how I can do that with architecture as well. French philosopher Paul Ricoeur compares narrative works with the built world, how they both contain a power of creating memory, making what is absent present. I aim to emphasize that phrase. If a narrative tells a story in time, architecture builds a story in space. I want to test the boundaries between architecture and fantasy and focus on possible problem-solving solutions utilizing fairy tales as my medium.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ade Ajayi, and my project is going to be on the redevelopment of Makoko settlement in Nigeria. In developing countries, urbanization is fast spreading through many communities. The spread in most cases is characterized by proliferation of slums and informal settlements, which is imposing enormous challenges on the capacity and capability of policymakers to manage the emerging urbanization trend. Makoko is a little community in Lagos, Nigeria, which was the former capital of Nigeria. It's a community that's built on water, and over time, as the city has began to grow, it's expanded into the water and pushed people further out. And because of pollution, it's began to deteriorate that community and the living conditions of the people living in it. Lagos is a very busy city, and it's constantly expanding. The problems within the community are sanitation. Refuse is always being dumped into the water because of poor sanitation facilities. The community also lacks utilities. They don't have running water, potable water. They also don't have good waste disposal services. Housing is also an issue. Because they are on water, there's limited resources for them to build. So they are forced to build with planks and wood. Education for the people in that area is also a big issue. Because of the rising number of citizens living in Nigeria, in the city Lagos, it has began to push the people out, so that community has become overpopulated. And all of these things result in healthcare being a big issue because of hygiene and sanitation issues. My redevelopment plan would focus on a few key principles: community participation, community development, ancestral and historical preservation, tourism and economic development, and it's all going to be based on sustainability and resilience.
You can go. Hello, my name is Trevor. My master's project is about the integration of landscape and architecture. What first got me thinking about this topic was the photographer that moved from New York to Miami. She took pictures of her surrounding environment and documented the flooding and the effects humans have on nature. But she did this in a unique way, and the pictures she took take time to look at and digest and unpack what exactly is going on. We have become desensitized to the destruction of nature that goes on around us, and the pictures are meant to bring awareness and shed light on what we're actually doing to the environment. She dubbed the amount of stress we are putting on Earth as climate anxiety, and how much the Earth can take until the damage is irreversible, and we have a pre-apocalyptic situation. And so this is exactly what you don't want to do, is just like clear forest or woods and just have a redevelopment. It looks like it just got flooded because of the water table is just so high. And so I looked into a couple architects that have tried to fuse architecture with environment. And one of them is Le Corbusier, and he wasn't necessarily successful, but we can still learn from his failed attempts. One of his proposals was called Radiant City, and was to have a very dense urban core. As the city radiates out, it becomes less urban and more rural. Some of the problems with this plan was that none of the green spaces he created was inhabitable or had any kind of program to them. It was more of just to be seen and not necessarily used. And then between the skyscrapers, the open spaces were massive, deserted, and unprogrammed. And then, but they still did, people still got ideas off of it, obviously from New York. And then I also studied Frank Lloyd Wright, and he suggested Broadacre City, and it was to give everyone 1 acre of land to farm on. It's outdated and would never happen, but you can still, he has good functionality with the program, and he thought of the city as more of a machine, and so did Le Corbusier. And so I'm suggesting maybe revitalizing an area and bringing nature back into it. And some of the good examples would be Apple, and it's dubbed the spaceship. And this is another example of people getting the idea from the Radiant City from Corbu. This is Epcot. This is one of the prototypes. As you can see, it's very dense in the middle, and it starts to expand out. It gets more and more rural. And then one good precedent would be the Apple Park, not necessarily the architecture, but how they used the land around it and preserved a lot of the woods. They had an arborist come and plant 9,000 trees. And then also the use of underground parking. There's an underground 1,000 person auditorium. And the only kind of criticism they got is that there's no other modes of transportation besides using a car to get there. And if you were to build a city, I think that like having a lot more different types of modes of transportation would benefit you greatly.
Hi, I'm Evan. The title of my thesis as of now is It's Always Been Now, and it's an exploration of human scale, mechanical connections, and the celebration of the movement. And in my thesis, I hope to explore how humans can interact with mechanical elements at different scales. And I'm going to do this by constructing different kinds of mechanical machines at varying scales of human interaction. The first one is Rube Goldberg machines. In my opinion, I think they're the most distilled version of how a machine can alter a person's reality of how a task is accomplished. And by adding a series of complications to a task that's completed, it gives the task at hand a more value and importance. And the more and longer the series goes, the more captivating the machine becomes. And I feel watchmaking has similar feelings that you get from the art of watchmaking. And in today's time, you can easily tell the time by looking at your phone, but there's still a captivatingness to mechanical watches. And with those principles, I've been researching kinetic sculptures, and through these sculptures, there's a series of mechanical elements, and I find them to be very interesting. And I think one of the first steps will be to create a series of these sculptures, but construct them through the lens of an architect. And the similar things come from this short film by Charlie Chaplin, Modern Times. And in this film, he gets sucked up by a machine. And I think it'd be interesting to start exploring what it would be like to be at the scale of a machine and how you occupy it and how the machine moves around you. So this is the first iteration of a project that I've been working on with kind of designing different kinds of machines and how humans can be moving through it by the use of the machine. So the yellow parts depict the areas where humans would occupy, and then by turning a hand crank, they would move around. So this is a project by Olson and Kundig, and they designed this installation for a museum where there's animals that are controlled by mechanical elements. And I think this gives a closer relationship to the installation and has a better chance of captivating the occupant. I think more examples by Olson and Kundig are a good way to look at. And these devices are used to help change spaces inside buildings and houses. And I think the use of these elements give more meaning to what you're moving. And this last section, I found this book called Super Green, and I'm not sure if this is the direction I want to take my thesis in, but I think it's an interesting precedence and something to think about. But in this book, he alters the way you think about green architecture and sustainability, and he does this by creating a negotiation between humans and nature and how these cabins kind of alter the way that you think about how you use the resources nature gives you. So, and it makes you think about, like, in the sense of using water, the more water you use, the lower you drop down. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is JT, and I want to look at cinematography within architecture, and I'm titling this thesis "Filmed Before Written" because I don't exactly know where this is going to take me, but I want to use digital tools as a way of creating architecture and creating a narrative within that. And I've been looking at a lot of different precedents. Palassimo, I've been reading a lot of his work and how he talks about architecture. within cinematography, and how it kind of unfolds and creates a context for the narrative to develop within. And in a way, I think that architecture is within a cinematography setup. It can tell a narrative just as well as the actual narrative. So another precedent is Liam Young. He came and lectured a while ago, and I was really inspired by his kind of outlook on things, seeking out the weak signals of possible futures, exaggerating them, and extrapolating them into future scenarios. And he thinks about these kind of these problems that arise and these problems that we're facing, and then develops them into what it might look like in the future, and does it in a very explores things in a very digital way. And I think that that the way that he thinks about things is really interesting for my thesis. So I'm going to really push the narrative through these future scenarios, I think. And then next slide. Yeah, we're going to talk about Quentin Tarantino a little bit and how he develops his narratives. Everything in his movies is very complex and kind of absurd, and it expresses this dirty realism. And the narratives, they unfold very slowly, but they're very dense and they have a lot of layers to them. So I think pushing that would be really interesting within an architectural context. And then Rafiq Anadol, he's a sculpture artist that basically takes data and augments the data into these sculptures. And it's a really interesting way of thinking about digital architecture and how that might look. And then a few other precedents here. I'm not going to talk about them all, but I think that Black Mirror, the Netflix series, is a really interesting cinematography piece that explores like future scenarios and how we look at them. And then I also want to look at a couple of other movies. I think Blade Runner is an extremely well-made movie that has a very rich architectural context to it, and it looks at lighting and architecture in a very different way. As well as the movie Terminal, the lighting and cinematography behind it is extremely powerful. And then developing all of this into what it means to have reactive architecture and how that can be explored through Unreal Engine and these other digital tools that we have access to. I would like to eventually get to where I can develop a dynamic architecture piece. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Erickson Diaz. My working title for my thesis is Queer Space, an inquiry into spatial queerness as a means to critique architecture. And before getting into this, I think it's important to define what the term queer itself is. According to Merriam-Webster, it means, and I quote, different in some way from what is usual or normal, end quote. And in today's context, it's kind of also used as like an umbrella term to self-identify as something other than heterosexual and or cisgender. So queer space itself is a really dense topic, and there's lots of different interpretations to that, what that can mean. And so because of this, I'll be using architecture, installation, painting, drawing, and even photography as a lens of trying to concisely define what queer space can mean. Yeah, so it's just this like ongoing dialogue of what that can mean. So as a first example, I want to use Philip Johnson's Glass House as a vessel to talk about queerness in architecture. The house itself served as a safe space for Philip Johnson and his lifelong partner, David Whitney. But it's kind of a funny, ironic project in that he made this space as a way of being able to hide his homosexuality, and yet it's an entirely glass house. So it's kind of like this like parodic, funny irony. And we can think of this irony as being camp, which is another term that I'll be using in my thesis. And this is another dense term which can mean a lot of things. But in this case, the house is camp in that it's ironic, it's theatrical in the way that they're displaying their queerness to the public. They're almost like putting on a performance for the people outside of the house and like within the neighborhood. Another architect whose work was deemed as being too camp was Bruce Goff. But the difference between him and Philip Johnson was that even though Bruce was a modernist too, he was marginalized for being his designs, almost like reflecting his queerness, were considered too feminine or flamboyant. And stepping away from architecture for a bit, I'll also be using installation as a way of offering a language that's slightly outside of architecture. And so this is Anthea Hamilton's project for the Tate Museum in 2016. And that's actually the butt of a famous architect, although they never disclosed whose butt it was. And I'll also be using my own drawings as a means of critiquing queer space and queer occupancy. Using my own drawings and paintings of other artists will just be another lens of being able to decode this kind of dense topic. So ultimately, I want to be able to concisely define what queer space is. I want to write about it and make drawings, collages, and even potentially design an installation as a means of critique. I'll be compiling all of this and publishing it as a resource for others. I think using my own queer space is important, and it'll be my way of adding to the canon of architectural history. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. So the objective for my thesis is to explore the relationship between architecture and film and literature. And with these three fields, I want to discover how they formulate similar structures to create experience. And with literature, there is different approaches. So in this slide, I reference 3 pieces of literature that use a straightforward approach to architecture. And in The Shadow of the Wind, Carlos Ruiz, he uses architecture of Barcelona to evoke emotions of foreboding within the narrative. And in Marcel Proust, in The Search of Lost Time, he speaks of resurrection of memory of the books and places of his childhood of reading as a way of wandering through the cities. And another type of fiction I'm looking into is dirty realism, which was a term coined by Bill Buford in the 1980s. And it was a North American literature movement that started in the 1920s by Charles Bukowski. And here we have Raymond Carver's What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. And the way that he writes is to sort of evoke these or to show these suburban settings to create a bland and mundane environment and stripping everything of adornment. And Gothic fiction is another way of shaping the narrative with architecture. In Northanger Abbey, the main character, Catherine, is taken aback by Thornfield Hall, which she reflects all the mysteries of Thornfield Hall through the characters of General Tinley. And as her feelings for General Tinley change, so does her feelings towards Thornfield Hall. And the house on the right, this is Strawberry Hill, which was created by Horace Walpole. And he took this house directly from his book, Castle of Otranto. And he created it when he finished writing that book. He created this house during the Georgian period of England. So I'm also looking at the 3 structures of writing film. And that consists of the setup, the confrontation, and resolution. And within that, there's different types of structure. So we have linear structure, and I'm specifically looking into Fabulous Cosette. So in the film of The Interview with the Vampire, Brad Pitt approaches a journalist in real time and tells him the story of his vampire life. And through this story, he goes in a chronological order, but he goes back and forth between memories. We also have a nonlinear structure, which in Eternal Sunshine on a Spotless Mind, the character, Jim Carrey's character, is going through new locations and new scenes throughout his memory, and you're kind of scattered and you don't know which point in time those experiences happened. And Wonderike is another nonlinear form of structure, and it kind of uses a dreamy sense to portray the narrative, and they kind of jump through different memories or different dreams, and you're never really sure one is what. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here, first of all. Ready to go, hand. Thank you. So my project for now is called Space Streets, and that hasn't really been delved into very much, but it's the idea of this investigation into the potential for improving quality of life on another planet through the reimagination of social urban spaces. To be clear, this is not an attempt to engage in the extremely high level of engineering that is involved in a project of this magnitude, but rather propose a plan for the colonization that focuses on promoting social health. So moving forward, I'm going to go through a few different precedents. First and foremost is the Mars Science City by Big. I think this is applicable, obviously, because it's the only precedent that I'm studying that actually considers like extraterrestrial habitation. So looking at it, it utilizes these dome-like structures to shelter settlements comprised in buildings which were 3D printed from organic material from Mars. While the technical aspect is beyond the scope of this investigation, the technique involved may allow for unique opportunities in terms of the urban layout. This project here, what's interesting to me here is this partially enclosed urban space that's created through a system of catwalks that are also kind of stitched together by like a glazing fabric that kind of creates this dynamic setting that is a sheltered setting, which would naturally need to exist in this kind of environment. So an aerial rendering of this project shows the previously mentioned system of catwalks connecting a series of pod-like structures and the scale of the interstitial spaces between these structures themselves. The next project is by Stephen Hull. And what kind of intrigues me here is this dramatic shifting fabric in this urban corridor. And I think what happens here, it creates a really dramatic space that can kind of function as a potential social hub in the future. And then here's an idea of kind of modularity or non-permanence with the bubble. So it's a more temporary structure that can be articulated to respond to a changing setting while blurring also at the same time, and probably more important to me, blurring the interior-exterior threshold and allowing occupants to experience the exterior without being exposed to those conditions. And then this sectional drawing kind of shows the relationship between the more temporary components and the more permanent physical components, and how these can potentially work together and cooperate to create a system of modularity where the permanent structure supports the temporary in some way. HIA Airport City, a really, really massive project that I think could respond to the scope of what we're looking at here. So it's a recurring theme with these precedents. It's the presence of a massive overhead condition which shelters multiple structures. In this project, the terrain is carved into instead of built on top of to create a terraced social space that is bordered by subterranean structures. These precedents, among many others, are being studied and analyzed to devise an approach to this project that will focus on the social implications involved with the colonization of a new place. Thank you.
I'm ready. Hi, my name is Salvador Garcia, and my thesis is titled The Cultural Revitalization and Re-Evolution of the American Resource Center. As of 2018, the foreign-born individuals living in the United States accounted for 13% of our entire population. The need for accessible healthcare, labor security, and culturally relevant information is evident now more than ever. Here we can see the largest concentration of immigrants in 20 of the United States' most important cities. We happen to live in a state that has 3 of these concentrations: Orlando, Tampa, and Miami. Miami being a gateway city for many immigrants and being the largest at 3 million. So the problem that I'm focusing on isn't when people are in these concentrations, but when they're outside of their reach. Due to the shifts in labor markets, immigrants, both legal and illegal, were increasingly settled outside well-established immigrant gateways in a new group of cities in new rural areas, small towns, and suburban areas. So both these community and governmental are inefficient or insufficient. So when immigrants aren't able to have resources readily accessible to them, we are able to break down the major challenges they face into 5 separate categories: poverty, labor, education, health, and home ownership. I'll go over health with you guys today. So I went over a study that the USF College of Medicine did, and these are the results of the study pertaining in knowledge of cervical cancer and within immigrants. In the red, you'll see that only when people are given videos did their knowledge about cervical cancer increase by 40% from baseline. And in this slide, we see that it came when it came to actually going to get screened for cervical cancer, results jumped to 53% from baseline. This only happened when they had cultural intervention with somebody or a cultural place. And this is statistically significant because it's not only a basic necessity, but it's a matter of life and death for some people. So because of this point, my project will focus on the Community Resource Center. As a strong point, here are 3 examples that are here in Tampa. One is a nonprofit, one is a government entity, and the other one's a religious. But all are the same standalone building that don't connect within the community. These are models that I want to stray away from. On the opposite end, this is one example I looked at to draw influence from. It's the Neighborhood Resource Center in Phoenix, Arizona. It's about 14,000 square feet, which houses government entities as well as public resources. A lot of the design is based off the history of the surrounding community. But for me, that's not the most important aspect of it, because for me, it's the ability that it became an anchor for the future of its community. And it's in this starting point that redefines the specific district in Phoenix. I aim to do the same thing here, either in Jupiter, Florida, or Kissimmee, Florida, with the immigrants in those areas. So for my last slide, I'll leave you guys with a quote from famous architect Francis Gehry, who uses African culture in London and Europe. And he says, the immigration issue is a big challenge, but is the challenge of our time. Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, it's Derek. So my project's called Animal Sanctuary Reuse. To the left, you'll see a model that I did this semester that ties it all together, animals representing animals. The wood right here, the wood represents the reuse part of a building that could be reused, in essence, something that you want to save, where the white represents the new. The term palimpsest is a term that is something that is when you take something reused or alter it, but it still bears its original traces or maybe newer traces of it. So in my project, I want to take a building and use it for something different. And then in the same time, I want to preserve at the same time. Why do I want to do reuse? Well, reuse has a habit of changing. Your past changes, your future happens, your present occurs. Services are needed or therefore no longer rendered at certain times. So therefore, buildings must change. Here's a quote I found very important in essence to what I'm trying to do here. Instead of fighting it being the original building of what it was, you take it, you reshape it, and you use all your energy in a new way. The new way being a pet sanctuary, something that could help benefit animals. Advantages of reuse. Here we have a box factory loss, which used to actually be a cigar factory, a cigar box factory in Tampa, and they turned a portion of it, what was remaining of it, into lost for people to live in. So they turned basically like a factory producing area into a residence. Here's another example of reuse where Ricardo Bofill in Barcelona, Spain, took an old decrepit cement factory and turned it into his home and residence. Such a large project that he's actually still working on it today, I believe. Another example of reuse is parking garages. We have tons of parking garages everywhere. Car is still very predominant right now, but projections show that maybe the car will not be as prominent in the future. But here's an example of an old parking garage from the 50s where they kept the parking garage, but they also had some mixed use and used residential units in it. Tampa is also known, even though Tampa is not a very old city in the US, it's still known for some reuse. Here we have Armature Works, which some of you may be familiar with, that used to actually house the trolley cars of Tampa. Reuse for a pet sanctuary. There's many people, many things out there, government entities, nonprofit entities out there trying to help pets that need this sort of resource, this sort of help. And most of you probably know these. The one in the middle with the truck is Rescue Rebuild. They go around, volunteer, and they actually turned a elementary school in West Virginia into a cat sanctuary. So for my project, I need to find a site for reuse, something that I could change and programmatically reuse. I need research. I'm currently reading several animal shelter needs and things of that sort to help and learn proper design programs for what they need. Thank you.
All right, hit it. So my working title is Waterboarding through Storyboarding. The graphic above speaks volumes to me. I think it demonstrates my exact intentions and what I'm about to discuss for the next 3 minutes. Hopefully you see where I'm coming from. And if not, you can find me at United Skates of America on Thursdays around 1. I can usually pick which songs I want to skate to because no one's there. Okay, so some thoughts on these inspirational pieces. 1, this architecture makes me sweat. 2, will I ever find love in details? 3, these landscape designs make me want to plug in my external CD drive and play Zoo Tycoon all day until my zoo has 5 stars and 95% of my guests are satisfied with their visit. And finally, is the pragmatic utopia even possible? I think every time I've gone to the beach, I've seen a kid digging a hole. And I think when one kid sees another kid digging a hole, he or she feels compelled to dig a hole as well, but on their own terms. The bigger and more complex the hole, the better, typically. And so children have unknowingly established a network of social status and hierarchy through a simple act fueled by ambition, maybe some jealousy, and the potential to leave an impact before the tide comes in. Color history, mango leaves, and cowpea. They may have more in common than you think. All colors have backstories and narratives that can be weaved into our own to strengthen the stories, places, or environments we'd like to depict. And by choosing the right shade of yellow, I could graphically communicate that someone is either about to die in the library or that someone has just shat themselves. Imagine being forced to find a partner to love and will be turned into an animal if you can't within 40 days. Imagine you're a war vet and you can time travel between the periods where you were captured by Germans or the time aliens from a distant planet captured you in a pornographic movie star and put you in their zoo to be observed. Someone already imagined those, but it makes you think. Is absurdity and satire an effective way to approach topics such as death, loneliness, and hope? Pregnant pause. So let's get serious. Cats make biscuits, figuratively. Let's say a biscuit company opens up. A cat is the mascot for said company because they make biscuits. Someone posts a picture of themselves eating a biscuit while their cat is making biscuits on them. The cat's name is Biscuit. Everyone loves the name, and all cats are named Biscuit from there on out. When's the last time you had a vivid dream? Was it lucid? Was it intrusive? Did it echo the world we live in and combine itself with altered representations of people, places, and things familiar to you? Were you naked? A surrealist technique aims to eliminate the distinction between dream and reality and attempts to link, correlate, and bind the unconscious mind to the real world. Can a building catfish you? Your instinct may be to say sure, it could be beautiful on the outside and ugly on the inside, or vice versa, but what's beneath the surface? Could it give itself an alternate identity? What are its intentions? Was it neglected or mistreated in its youth? Lastly, is it the creator's fault, or are we responsible in introducing ways of growth and development? Lastly, be sure to check out The Legend of Korra, coming to theaters this December. It's starring Kim Jong-un as the Avatar. You may have heard recently that he was sick or dead or whatever, but he's just been training and didn't want anyone to know about it. Consider it redemption for Seth and James. I think they're going to pull through with this one. I really do. Thanks so much.
Good morning. Hi, Hannah. Okay, so an optic illusion is an illusion caused by the visual system and characterized by the visual present that arguably appear to differ from the reality. For example, the picture showing the Angibus image that you see the front face of the person as well as the side view of the face. And this could be viewed by many different ways. People may see the, the boob-like kneecap or the bowl of water that's clear. For me, it's the oversized feet that she have on. So For the chop illusion, optic illusion or error in visual perception in which to apparent contrast of an object versus substantially to the most viewers depends on its relative contrast to the field, on which in my case will be the perspective of the America before I come study here versus now, how the changes. And the optic illusion often happen in architecture as well. For example, this one is the Eiffel Tower, the sample of city of Paris, which contain a rich historical and cultural heritage, and the other one just a copy of French city in China. That's meaningless. By doing the research, I'm looking to Anthony Macau's solid light work, volumetric from composed of beam of projected light slowly involving real three-dimensional space. Macau regards his works as occupying a space somewhere between sculpture, sentiment, and drawings. Sculpture because the projected volume must be occupied and explored by the moving spectator. Sentiment because this large-scale object is not static, but structurally shift and change over time. And the drawing because the genesis of each installation is two-dimensional line drawing work. So by the beginning of work, I want to do something related to color draw illusion, which is designed to exploit the graphic similarity. In this case, the negative space and the positive space are inverted from one of each other, and the composition drawing function as a connecting pieces that creating the dialogue between two. This one by deconstruction the camera length based on understanding of its section axle, set up the next stage for the section collage, which will help to understand how reality process and transfer into illusion abstractly, if that makes sense. So by the end goal, rather than just exploring, understand the structure and material of the local that can be related, and also having my own thought into the project, I also want to kind of like discover and unfold the deeper meaning layer of architecture element that speak for the culture itself, and how to emerge that within the design. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Austin Lee, and I'll be talking about the sources of landfills and the forms versus the objects within them. A natural landscape is set by compositional rules and exists on its own without human culture. However, in the 21st century, landscapes that are totally untouched by human activity no longer exist. What happens when people start creating their own landscapes, not from the adoration of the natural, but from the necessity of space? Is that what landfills are? There are over 3,000 active landfills in the U.S. alone, with the largest one standing over 500 feet high and spanning across 700 acres in California. A problem is that we often overlook trash and don't know where it ends up going or the everlasting masses that it creates. But if landfills are bad, what's the alternative? There is the relationship between discarded objects in form making and the human form. Pictured here are all materials of discard. When garbage is expelled from our useful objects, it becomes linked to the sublime as a negative representation or even a non-presentation. If this is the case, then garbage only becomes an object of representation when it is reappropriated as an object for human consumption. I was starting to look at the work from Yao Lu, a Chinese photographer who captures a number of landfills. He superimposes familiar elements to make the photo seem inhabited when they're actually not. His work provides a commentary on China's modernization and increasing pollution. Form comes from any object, but we often associate those forms and spaces from discarded objects to be landfills. There is the form, and then there is the object of representation, the known versus the affiliated. How can we disassociate the two? Western culture has a negative connotations towards discarded objects. Is it because they're highly consumerist and capitalistic societies? Is there a denial for buying or throwing away more than what's actually needed? What is our personal relationship to these forms and to the spaces that they inevitably take up? What qualities define something new versus something that's discarded? The exclusivity of the term landfill led me to create Trostfeld to further investigate the accumulation of what once was and to start accounting for the diversity in the language of refuse. Time and decay are significant elements when acknowledging discarded objects. Almost everything we toss out will outlive us, yet are each in our lives for merely a fraction of a moment. This art installation by Greenpeace portrays the late stages of decomposition, hoping it raises the issue of plastics polluting the oceans and questioning the likelihood of this happening. How we treat trash in a space can mean a number of things, from the methods and how we discard it, like incineration or burying it, to how we are physically and mentally reacting to it when it's mentioned. Until garbage is integrated within a system of human intention, or human systems are integrated with the materials of discard, then trash remains part of the intangible sublime, as a reality somehow beyond and different from intelligible structure. McDowell Espinosa Architects ask, what if we eliminate the need for raw material and banish all waste? For me, this raises a question of our need to create something new out of the new. In the future, does what we consider waste actually become a resource, and what is stopping us from doing that today? We're each reflected in what we use and ultimately discard. However, a discarded object doesn't necessarily have to associate with trash. I want to re-examine our narrative to the idea of trash and the objects and forms that they're composed of, and to allow a language to emerge from those materials that are usually discarded and hidden. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ricardo Lopez, and a working title for my thesis is The Formulation of Dwellings and Education for Unsettled Families. Beginning is a social issue with homelessness is a complex social problem with a variety of underlying economic and social factors, such as poverty, lack of affordable housing, uncertain physical and mental health. Many parts of the world suffer from hunger, poverty, and homelessness. Facing these hardships causes malnourished families, low quality living environments, and overcrowding at shelters. People who are homeless are most often unable to acquire and maintain regular, safe, secure, and adequate housing due to an unsteady or lack of income. Homelessness and poverty are interrelated. One study on managing chronic pain among homeless persons found that treatment is a challenge due to stressful living on streets or in shelters, inability to afford prescription medications, and poor sleeping conditions. Some refuse to see doctors for their pain because of how they have been treated in the past, and some use drugs or alcohol to cope with their pain because of their history of missed appointments. The injustice that homeless people face today isn't right. Not the entire homeless population has sought out this life. Many of them have gone through unfortunate circumstances that have caused them to end up this way. The common denominator is a major crack in their life foundation. Upon researching these civilians who have hit rough patches in their lives, I've decided the best way to help is to educate them. Education is a virtue. Knowledge is the one thing in life that can't be taken. Looking at precedent studies, I discovered several organizations that have attempted to tackle the issues of homelessness and who are achieving great things. Some of the well-known organizations are United Way, Feeding America, and Habitat for Humanity. These three, along with countless others, have stepped up and made an impact in many lives. Drawing upon these organizations for inspiration, I plan to fully develop housing kits in which people can purchase them and put together. So by investing sweat equity, they can appreciate even more what they now have in life. Along with the housing kits, a community/recreation center will be developed for those people that now inhabit these newly constructed homes. These houses will be along the lines of single-family homes or townhouses. The construction of these homes will be in a gated community-style manner. Each house kit will be assigned to a plot of land, so once construction occurs, all homes together will make up a newfound neighborhood. At the center of this new neighborhood is where the community center will be located. It will house many different amenities and services available to new residents. The rough program of the community center is to contain classrooms to educate residents on sustainability, food consumption and creation, and on becoming more self-sufficient. The community center will create a safe environment to learn and practice creating and making amongst each other. I believe this center will help so many people gain knowledge that they can take with them for the rest of their lives. Along with the classrooms, there will be a retail component in which to bring in revenue and allow for residents who have learned quite a bit that they can showcase their cooking talents and run a mini cafe or a shop for a week. This will allow for better acceptance mentality in the world in hopes that the new residents can see the progress they are making in their lives. I envision that the homes alone will already build newfound character in a lot of these people, but the community center is where the building up of these people will occur the most. By showing them kindness, hope, and gifting them the beauty of education, hopefully it will spark the needed change in their lives. In lieu of my thesis project, I hope many more implications of this type of efforts occur around the world. Many people are in need and others do not care to help. Thank you.